Hello and welcome to the IslesNation podcast. I'm Pete Truskowski, also known as NY IslesNation. I'm joined today by Mike Rankiewski and Carrie Haber. How are you guys doing today?
Doing well. Two forwards in overtime. Really doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, and all of a sudden we've become a road warrior type team. This is something new for us this year.
Yeah, so going into Monday's trade deadline, Monday at 3 p.m., I believe, the Islanders are the third hottest team in hockey right now, posting a 7-2-1 record over their last 10 games. Only the Anaheim Ducks and the Washington Capitals have been better over that time period. The Islanders have started their road trip with three straight wins over the Devils, the Wild, and the Flames last night, coming back from a 1-0 third period deficit to win on a Josh Bailey overtime goal. How about that? Josh Bailey, Mike. Josh Bailey.
Give him the 5-year extension now. Why wait?
Oh, but what a play by Tavares, right? I mean,
No,
Bailey did
that
a
was
good
all
job
Bailey.
catching it, but that was a great play.
Yeah, I wanted Bailey actually put himself offside on a breakaway like 5 minutes before that, like a minute before that,
Yeah, that
and
was
I
fun.
wanted him. I wanted him dead, and then he scored. I literally said to put a cap in his ass. I believe was my exact terminology. But yeah. So the Islanders picking up their play, and it seems like they're pretty much at this point a lock for a playoff team. I mean, one could say they were never not a lock to be a playoff team. They've always been right around this area, second, third seed in the Metro, and there's always been some separation, whether it's games in hand between them and teams like the Devils and the Hurricanes. But yeah, the Islanders still have, I think now they're at 4 games in hand on the Devils and something like that with the Hurricanes. And not only do they have that many games in hand, but there's like an 8 point, 6 point separation between them. So for all intents and purposes, it looks like the Islanders will be a playoff team. Not that many of us actually doubted that. I mean, but yeah, so they'll be buyers, you'd have to assume on Monday. But with the way the team's playing lately, with their 7-2-1 mark in their last 10, and everything coming together, do you think that do you need to make a major move, or is this team coming together at the right time and you just want to ride the wave with them? Mike, what do you think?
I think it's time for a big move. I think, yeah, while recognizing that they've obviously been playing better hockey lately, guys are definitely starting to pick up their games. Obviously, a lot of that I think has to do with Tavares. I think now is the time where you push some of those chips in the middle that you've gathered over the last several seasons in draft picks and prospects and young roster players, and I think you go for it. I think most people recognize, and we spoke about it in the past, where we're not probably one or two players away from winning a title, but I do think there is some definite benefit to at least winning a playoff round, or even maybe even going further than that. Beyond the fact that obviously it's been 23 years since they've won a playoff round, they're in a new community in Brooklyn. They're trying to build a new fan base in the area, and they're competing with two other franchises for fans. And whether you like it or not, a lot of people in hockey, especially hockey in this area, are bandwagon fans, which is fine. That's every sport has their group of that. And I think the only way to really to kind of get some of that is to have some type of playoff run. I mean, we've heard obviously reports, true or not, but Brooklyn isn't. People are saying it's not going great. The arena itself, maybe looking to get out, according to some reports. So give them a playoff round victory. Give them a couple playoff rounds, and I think making a big move, I think it's the way to go. I think just standing pat and saying, well, we're playing very good hockey now, and that's it. I don't think that's wise. I mean, you look at Chicago, arguably the best team in the league already, and they go out and add Andrew Ladd. You hear rumors of Washington looking to add pieces. Chicago may not be done. The Rangers are looking to add pieces. So I think now's the time where you can't just sit and say, well, we've won 7 out of 10. We're picking up points. While that's great and all, I think you really need to make a big swing here and try to bring in one more impact player, especially up front where I think they need a little more help.
I agree. I definitely think that, again, we spoke about this with, the amount of turnover that's coming this offseason. We all know it's going to happen. So I'm with you. To me, this is an important time for management to, give this team, this core players, an extra shot, one big boost to really make moves here. The only thing that I'm concerned about is there doesn't seem to be that much out there. I mean, there's a handful of players, sure, that would really move the needle. I would say there's probably three or four tops players who are playing on their first team's first lines right now. So there's not a lot of supply out there, and the deals that have been made already, they've been hefty in price. I mean, the Andrew Ladd deal was hefty in price. The Roman Polak deal was hefty in price. So there's a lot of competition out there. Despite the fact that there may only be like 5 or 6 true Stanley Cup contenders, teams don't really think that way. And so there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be out there buying and not a lot of teams that are selling. So I think it's going to be a really interesting deadline. It'll be interesting to see if some general managers get a little bit more creative than just trying to trade for unrestricted free agents. Maybe there are a few other names out there that we may or may not know about that could be on the move on Monday.
You brought up the Andrew Ladd trade, and that's something I wanted to touch on. The Blackhawks traded their first-round pick this year and top prospect Marco Dano and a conditional pick in 2018 for Ladd and two shoddy players. I mean,
Yeah,
they're not going to make.
salary filler essentially.
Yeah, so are the Islanders in a position right now, with where they are as a team and an organization, to make a move like that? Because one can argue that Andrew Ladd might push the Chicago Blackhawks right back to a repeat Stanley Cup. And if you ask me, the Islanders are not an Andrew Ladd away from a Stanley Cup. So, yeah, I mean, the Islanders have been rebuilding for over a decade at this point, it seems like. And they have a lot of young players and prospects. But as a fan, and if you were Garth Snow, do you feel like this team right now is in a position where they could trade a package like Josh Hosang or Anthony Beauvillier and the first rounder for 2 months of Andrew Ladd? Is this team in that position right now, do you guys think?
Yes.
Go ahead, Carrie. You can start it
No,
off.
the answer is yes, but at this point, there's only one player that I would do that for, and it's Eric Stahl. You could make an argument maybe for Louis Eriksson if he actually gets moved, but it seems like there was this conjecture today that Boston was actually going to be able to sign him. So if that happens, and you can obviously take him off the board. And if he does sign, that leaves Eric Stahl. There's nobody else that seems to be out there that we know about, at least, that I would move a package like that for. So we talked about the Islanders going for it. I think we all agree with that, but we have to still keep that within reason to a degree. We can't just be throwing away a top prospect in a first-round pick for, a guy like, P.A. Parento, for example, or a guy, like Dale Weiss, who's having a really good productive season, but is he really that good of a player? No. So I think it's important that that Garth, stays within reason here and doesn't stretch to make a move that he will regret, unless it's for a player that is truly a guy that can really elevate this team.
But see, and while I understand that, I mean, I look at the Blackhawks and I understand we're not at their level. We don't have the championships in our back pocket, and maybe the organization realizes that, and they know that, hey, we can, if we get burnt on a move or two, who cares? We've won 3 titles in the last 6 years. Who's going to complain in the fans or on the team? But I think what it underscores what Chicago's done is they've obviously identified certain guys, Tays, Kane, Seabrook, and Keith, really especially, and I guess you could throw Hossa in there as well. That's their core group of guys, and everything else, they'll fill the pieces in around them. What does that mean? Drafting and developing players, or prospects, or free agency, or trades. I don't think they're worried. I don't think they're obviously worried about, well, we traded a first round pick and what are we going to do without that player. because I think they realize as long as we have our 4 or 5 core group of guys, we can find a way. We can find them in with middle round draft picks, with bargain free agent signings. We can kind of put the pieces in there together. So I while I completely understand, you don't want to just start getting careless with trading players away and mortgage in the future where realistically you're probably not one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the league. I think at some point you have to get a little aggressive. I think it would help put a charge into the team. I think obviously it would excite the fan base, even if it is a short term, and maybe in the long term it's not the best move for the team. I really think it's pivotal that this organization has a playoff run this year. Even if a playoff run is one round of one victory, I still think that's imperative for this organization at this point.
It's funny that you brought some of these teams and name that I brought up because we do have a breaking news trade that just happened, not with the Islanders, but Montreal has traded Dale Weiss and Thomas Fleischman to Chicago for Philip Deneau and a second-round pick in 2018.
Jesus Christ.
So Chicago continues to basically steal the trade deadline and makes their third trade in 2 days. And to Mike's point, it seems like they are fairly serious about winning a fourth Stanley Cup.
Yeah, I mean, and do you think anyone, if they win another cup this year, even if they go to the finals and lose, obviously they'd have a run of 3 cups in 7 years, 4 finals appearances. Do you think any one of their fans or anyone in the organization is going to care in 5 years from now if guys like Taves and Kane start to decline and they have a run where they hit a rut and they're not an elite team anymore and they're a Midland playoff team, if that? Do you think anyone's going to care? So yeah, I understand you always want to position yourself to be effective in the future. It's a cap league. Having young prospects who could step in at a cheap price are vital. Having draft picks to essentially keep replenishing that farm system is vital. But if you win a cup or 2, or if you have a dominant run, for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, who cares if you're going to struggle for a couple of years after that? I mean, you're in this to win, and you can't just keep kicking the can down the street and say, well, we're kicking the can down the line and say, well, that's okay. Maybe next year we'll worry about it, or maybe next year we'll be better and we'll try to organically progress, and then we'll get that big guy and we'll make that big Andrew Ladd or that big Eric Stoll or pick a name trade. I think now's the time to really get aggressive. The East, I think, is fairly wide open outside of Washington. They are a great team right now, but let's. I don't think we're dead in the water if we can maybe get a little reinforcements against them. We'd still be underdogs, but you still got 20 games of regular season left. You never know what happens with injuries and who gets hot and cold and matchups. So I don't think it's smart just to say, well, let's wait until we're one player away before we make a big move. I don't think that's the proper way to do it. I mean, I think historically, if you looked over the last several years, there always seems to be a surprise team or two that has a deep run. That if you would have said at the deadline they have no shot of doing anything, and next thing you know, they're in the finals or they're winning a cup. I mean, it's LA won a cup as an 8 seed. I don't think people were saying at the deadline, let's pack it up, LA. You have no shot. I mean, let's be honest here.
I agree. I do agree with that. I think this is the right time for the Islanders to really make a move. But it is different than Chicago. I mean, Chicago is a team that already has 3 Stanley Cups in their back pocket, and the Islanders are a team that has 0 rounds in their back pocket. So, to me, when you talk about not caring about the future, Chicago's a team that probably doesn't have to care about the future as much because they're locked into their entire core for a long period of time, and as soon as they all decline, the team is going to decline no matter what. So they're just trying to keep the window open as long as they possibly can.
But as you said, you even said it before. Your first statement is this team, as we've all acknowledged, will likely look very different next season.
No, totally.
So we can't just sit here and say, well, we'll see how we are in the future now, and let's keep gathering the trade assets, and we're going to wait until that one big splash comes along. It may never come along. It's not they're not guaranteed anything. I always laugh when people say, well, the Penguins, for instance. Well, they stunk for so long, and then then they got really good and they won a title, and there was no, you know, Pittsburgh went from being a terrible team to they made the playoffs one year, in the first time with Crosby, his second year in the league, and they lost in the first round, I think, to Ottawa. Then the second year they made the playoffs, they went to the finals, and then the following year they won a cup. So I don't think it has to be, well, we have to take these baby steps. There's no rhyme or reason.
No,
If you have a shot, go for it.
I agree. I'm totally on board with you, with them, quote, sacrificing the future this season and going for it. I think there's a lot of benefit to be had in doing that. The problem that Pittsburgh ran into is that they did it over and over and over and over again, and now they're a team that has zero prospects, zero draft picks, and a team that is struggling to stay in eighth place. That's what I think the Islanders need to avoid. But I think you would agree with that. For 1 year, there's a lot of reason why they should go for it this year. And so to me, no, the first round pick doesn't matter. One of the four forward prospects, yeah, you can probably afford to move them too. I just want to make sure, when I make this point, it's like I'm cool sacrificing the 2016 draft, and I'm cool sacrificing a draft pick from 2013 or 2014 or 2015. I just want to make the point that it shouldn't be a thing that continues over time. If you want to go for it this year. But next year, you got to, start rebuilding that prospect pool so that you can do this again going forward. This is a fine line that he has to draw between, consistently going for it while also, still building, not for the future, but still building to keep this team sustainable where they are.
So, Carrie, if Cheladeoff, or however the hell you pronounce it, called you and said, I'll send you Lad for Bavilier and your first rounder, would it be a yes or a no from you?
It's tough. Honestly, for Lad, I probably wouldn't have done it, but for Eric Stahl, I would do it. I think I said that Andrew Ladd was a needle mover 2 weeks ago, and I stand by that. He still would have been for this team, but the best player on the market, in my opinion, is Eric Stahl, and Eric Stahl is, to me, exactly what this team needs. He's a player that can be center, wing, first liner, plays first line power play, huge amount of experience, big body. He's pretty much exactly what the Islanders need. And to me, he's a better player than Andrew Ladd. So if Carolina called me up, and again, this is an in-division trade we're talking about, but if they called me up and said, give me your first-round pick and one of your top prospects, and you have a really good chance to get a guy that can propel you, potentially to a round or two or hopefully more, that's the guy I do it for. There's probably nobody else that seems to be available that I would make a trade like that for, though.
Mike, same question to you.
Well, I know you're a little young. It's Shevel Day, the GM on Winnipeg, but I would have done it, absolutely. We're talking about a pick, realistically, you figure somewhere in the 20s, even if it's early 20s to mid 20s. While there's obviously a chance you'll get a good player there, and I understand most likely Ladd would be here for 2 months, and then he'll probably look for the highest amount of money, and God bless him. But I really think it would have been a move that would have energized the team a little bit. I think that we got the fan base excited. I think, and again, I think you position yourself to even to win a round. I think that is a good thing for this organization. And as we look forward to the potential playoff matchups, at this point, there's probably a 75% chance we're going to get matched up against the Rangers in the first round. And I don't think I need to tell either of you how important it would be to beat those guys. Even if we lost in the second round to Washington or wherever else, I think you both would agree that if we beat the Rangers in the playoffs in round one, I think we all would agree that it would be a successful season. So you hate to say, well, I don't want to, 20 games for a player and a playoff run is first round pick's a lot to give up, but that's the cost of doing business. We're like I said, if you don't go for a guy like that, you're trading away, some other pieces for a depth guy, which, as Carrie likes to say, doesn't really move the needle.
Totally, and for Ladd, I would have done one of those two things. First round pick, sure. Bavilier, I hate to do it, but sure. It's both combined that to me you need a real star, a guy that isn't just going to be someone that's good at everything, a guy that is great at something. And Eric Stahl is great at offense. So that that's why I would for him move both of those assets.
And
But
I will just say one other thing I'll add is, going back to this Chicago discussion. Obviously, they're trying to keep the window open, and whether they win this year or they don't win for another 20 years, obviously they've had a very successful run that any other organization would trade for them in a heartbeat. But I would say go ask Ranger fans how they feel about '94. Now, obviously, everyone knows the history of how long their drought was. They traded away Tony Amonte. They traded away Mike Gartner. They traded away Todd Marchant. They traded away, I think, Phil Bork, although I don't think they got much for him.
Doug
But
Wade.
they traded away a lot of pieces in a short amount of time, and they essentially sacrificed a good part of their future by getting rid of a guy like Amonte and Marchmont. So, but do you think they cared that they maybe they didn't have an extended 10-year run or 5-year run? They won their cup and they got the hell out of there, and they don't really care that they had hired guns in there. And so, yes, well, I would love to say let's build a sustainable winner for the next 10 years, and I agree with you. I'm not suggesting to do what Pittsburgh seems to do, and every year they kind of just it's like to me Pittsburgh is paying with everything on a credit card. It's great now, but sooner or later they're gonna have to pay the bill, and
Mm-hmm.
that's gonna be soon. That's probably sooner rather than later. So I recognize future draft picks are important. I'm not saying to get rid of them all and blow away the future, but you only have to hit once, and it's successful, and no one will care that you traded away a first round pick if you have a big run. No one's going to say, well, yeah, we had a big run, but we lost out on you know some 18-year-old from Canada that we won't see in 5 years. I mean, at some point, you just have to go for it.
No, and I'm not even sold on keeping that pick. To me, the first round pick it exemplifies a lot of flexibility. So, the Islanders don't have a second round draft pick. They could use that first round pick and move back and, get a couple more picks and then trade one of them to get a player. They could, pick obviously. They could do a bunch of things with that pick. So, to me, it's not just like, oh, hey, we're going to pick 20th and hopefully we get a player that's here in 5 years. To me, it's more of a really flexible asset that the team has where they can use it in many different directions. And that's why I think the pick is important. It's not the actual player that they're going to select at 25 or whatever. It's the fact that if you really have one shot because they don't have a second round pick to get an asset that's going to come in here and do something good if they trade it. So I want to make sure that it's the right player. Again, for Ladd, I would have traded the first round pick. It's when you add in that second piece where I'm kind of like, okay, Ladd is a good player, but he's not a great player. He's a needle mover, but he's not a superstar. And for me to trade to trade for a superstar, that's when I'm giving up multiple assets, like what Pittsburgh did with Marian Hossa. That's a situation where I'm trading multiple assets to bring in, a true superstar. I don't think Andrew Ladd is that. He's a very good player, but he's not that. So, um, you know, again, that's why if you're going to put together a package like that, and again, Ladd probably sets the market from that standpoint. And so that's why I'm starting to become a little bit more bearish on the market in general, is because there's a lot of players that are out there, but there doesn't seem to be, the market seems to be kind of what we saw a couple of years ago, where teams are going to overpay for average players. You saw what Dale Weiss just got traded for. He was traded for a second round pick and a prospect. Dale Weiss, who plays on the third line for the Canadians, second
Uh,
round pick and a prospect.
Pete,
So
what do you think? Do you think would you have if Cheveldae called you up and with that offer, would you have said yes, or would you have turned them down and looked for something better?
I absolutely hate this spot right now. I would have said no, and it's weird for me because you look at this team right now, and I don't think they're an Andrew Ladd. Even if they had Eric Stoll, I still think they'd win a round, but I still don't see him as a real cup contender. And yeah, you would make that move and you would trade like your first rounder and a top prospect, and then you gain some momentum by winning a round or two this year, and you go to build on that momentum, and Stoll or Ladder gone, Oposo's probably gone, Hamnick's likely gone, and you just traded your two of your top assets for nothing, and then it would just, I mean, I don't know if it's worth it at this point
But
because
see, it's not nothing though. A playoff run is something. That's the
yeah, a
notion that
playoff run is something if you could build on it, though. If you're gonna lose half your core right after this season, like it's expected the Islanders are with Hamnick and Oposo, and then whoever they trade for, and on top of that, getting rid of two of their probably top five assets in Beauvillier in the first round pick. I mean, at that point, is it worth it? I mean, it's a tough spot because I see both sides to it, but I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I really don't. I would say no to that trade because I think Andrew Ladd is really overrated. To be honest, I mean, he has 34 points and Bailey has what 26 points. I mean, he had 16 points, 57 career playoff games. Bailey has 8 and 13. I mean, we
oh
hate
yeah,
Josh
and you know what?
Bailey and
To be
Ladd.
fair, yeah, no, to be fair, I don't love Andrew Ladd. I mean, I don't. Yeah, and maybe misinterpreted your question first. I thought you had said would you trade the first. I didn't realize it was would you trade a similar package for him. I mean, would I trade the first for Ladd straight up? Absolutely, I would have. Would I add a top prospect? Eh, I'm in the same boat as you in the sense Ladd's I think good. I don't think he's great. I think he's a little bit overrated. I think there's a little bit of the Canadian media is pumping him up, almost like a Ryan Smith. I mean, he's a nice player, but is he really going to change the fortune of the organization? I don't know, but I, I, I would have no problem moving a first plus other assets for other guys if they're available. But yeah, no, I guess maybe I misinterpreted your original question, or maybe I just misheard you. But but my overall point I think remains the same that I'm definitely willing to kind of push some more chips around this year as opposed to than they've done in the past.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, and to me, it's not just, oh, they win around and then they lose everyone. When you win around, a lot of good things happen. One, you get your entire playoff run there on out is on national television. You play in a huge market in the Islanders' case. And again, given the matchup that it's likely to be in the first round, it's not. They're going to end up captivating the city, and that goes both ways. Whoever wins that round. So to me, it's like, oh, you get all this extra national attention. You have salary cap flexibility. You generate momentum in a new part of where you play. Uh, there's a lot of good that comes from it, and to me, it becomes a lot easier to bring in free agents after a run like that. We've seen it before. I mean, Arizona Coyotes are a perfect example of a team that went to the conference finals, and then all of a sudden people started to go down there and play, and everyone was like, why? But, at the time they were perceived to be a successful franchise despite the uncertainty. Obviously, Arizona and Phoenix have things like, weather advantages that other places don't, but, the fact of the matter is winning makes you an attractive place to be. And right now, the Islanders are kind of in this really awkward spot, I think, throughout the league, where team players think and they see that this team is good, but they haven't actually quote seen it. And until that happens, there's still going to be a little bit of hesitancy to, I think, sign here. And in all things being equal situations, so it's on the franchise at this point. It's on the players to go make a name for themselves and make them an attractive fan base that or franchise. That is ultimately what brings players in. Obviously, money does, but you become a high profile franchise when you win. Chicago in 2004, not a high profile franchise. 10 years later, the NHL is basically doing all they can to get as many events in Chicago, get Jonathan Taves on TV as much as possible. That's what winning does.
Yeah, I mean, for some reason, I feel like Garth has my mindset here from what I've seen from him over his 10-year tenure as GM. But a name that's been floated around the Islanders, and I know Carrie's been up and down with this name, but Arthur Staple's been hinting at him, and there's been some other rumor mongers that have thrown him around and linked him to the Islanders, and it's our good old friend P.A. Parento, who is having a decent season with the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think he has 16 goals and 32 points or something like that. He's on a pretty cheap contract. He's a free agent at the end of the year, I believe, and he has chemistry with John Tavares. I believe JT had his best ever season at even strength playing with PA. And you'd think his asking price would be significantly lower than the price that the Blackhawks paid for Andrew Ladd. So, I mean, I posted a Twitter poll yesterday on my account, and it was literally 50-50. Are you interested in reacquiring PA Parento? It was literally split 50-50 last I saw it. So, I mean, this is a perfect question for debate. It's a 50-50 proposition. Are you guys interested in reacquiring PA Parento?
I go up and down.
No, I'm not.
Go ahead.
I um, to me, he's and either we're gonna either go big or do nothing. Essentially, I don't think it makes sense to start trading away mid-round draft picks or prospects for a guy who I don't think is going to be a big impact here. I know, Pete, you said that Tavares had a very good season at even strength with Parento on his line. What was that, about 4 years ago maybe now? There's no guarantee that they're just going to pick up and just start going as if they did. And let's be honest, that was a different team then, different philosophy. They are losing, not this, and I'm not putting this on Parento that they were losing in that time, but it's also, they were playing a different style. It was a little more carefree. There was not much expectations. They didn't have to play maybe two-way hockey as much. So you have to, so while you definitely make the valid point that hey, Tavares, they've been successful together in the past, but now we're talking. I think it's 3 or 4 years now already. So I don't know. I'd rather if I'm not gonna make a big move, then I just a trade for the sake of making a trade is to me doesn't do anything unless you're going to tell me that they're going to have a significant injury or Grabowski's hurt a lot more than they're letting on, and they want to bring in somebody for depth. But other than that, I'd rather just see what else is out there and go another direction.
Yeah, I mean he's not my top choice, but I've been up and down about this, and I woke up this morning kind of changing my mind for the first time and saying I would be okay with it, and there's 2 reasons for that. The first one is John Tavares came out yesterday and said to Arthur Staple, quote, "We should be adding, not subtracting." Immediately, that throws out any possibility where I think it's okay to do nothing at the deadline. When your best player is coming out and saying that he wants to see additions to this team, general manager needs to take that and go make something happen. Anything. Even if it's, again, a Tyler Kennedy type move. Now, this would be better than that, but, hypothetically, when your best player is saying that, you got to do it. So that's 1. 2, PA Parento is quietly having a really good season, and I know he's starting to get a lot more notoriety for it over the last week, again, due to his, trade status and whatnot. But he's playing second line on Toronto. He's playing first power play. He's actually scoring at a higher rate than Andrew Ladd is. He's scoring at a higher rate than Mikhail Botker. He's scoring at a higher rate than quite a few guys that are actually on the market right now. And when you talk about, guys that are going to leave this team and, potential turnover and whatnot, I'd feel pretty confident that the Islanders could sign PA Parento to another contract. Now, there's merits of saying, like, oh, hey, maybe he's not a guy that you want to dedicate multiple years to. I get that. We've been down this road with him before, and they let him walk. But if they are worried about not being able to replace Kyle Oposo, trading, a third-round pick or whatever for Parento, bringing him in and then signing him, that would be a really good use of a deadline acquisition, I think. So this is like I see the merits of not doing it. Ultimately, no, I don't think that he's like a guy that can come in here and lead the Islanders to a Stanley Cup. He's just not good enough to do that. But I think stylistically, he is a good matchup against teams like the Rangers. He does have chemistry with John Tavares, and he takes a spot on the power play that I think would be beneficial where Kyle Oposo currently plays, which is, we've seen it before. His ability to make cross-ice passes is phenomenal, and I think that he'd be a really good fit in the system that we play. So I'm more for it today than I was. I do think it makes sense for the Islanders to bring him in. Again, I don't think he would be my top choice, but Monday comes and guys are flying off the board, and this is a player who's left. Certainly I think it would make sense to bring him in.
Yeah, I mean, I just looked at stats. He's been in the playoffs twice, once with the Avs and once with the Habs, and he has 5 points in 15 career playoff games. And you always gotta wonder about a player like that. I mean, you gotta look where he's played. He played in Montreal last year and didn't get a lot of major time. He succeeded on the Islanders, and he succeeded on the Islanders when they were bad, and he's succeeding on the Maple Leafs this year when they're bad. So he could be one of those proverbial good players on a bad team that shrinks in come playoff time. I mean, the way he plays, his style of play doesn't really translate to the playoffs. If you remember the series last year with the Capitals, so I mean, there's cause for concern there. I mean, he really didn't play well either playoff appearances he's had,
I
and
agree, Pete, but I think playing the Rangers would be a much better fit for him than playing a team like from the West that he played against when he was with Colorado. And then last year when he was with Montreal, they played what? They played Tampa, right?
yeah, they played Tampa, and I
And
think
Ottawa,
they,
and Ottawa, I think.
yeah,
Right. So Ottawa's a little bit of a heavier team. Tampa would seem to be more of a fit for him matchup wise. I don't know how he fared exactly in that playoff series in particular. But I do think that against the Rangers, this is the type of game that he would succeed in, a fast game. He is a chippy player, so I understand those concerns. You don't necessarily want to bring in players that don't have strong playoff experience, but it's a pretty small sample size, all things considered. We are talking about 15 games, and when he was here, he certainly had 15 games where he wasn't as productive as other 15 game samples. So doesn't stress me out too much. And again, we are theoretically talking about a mid round asset. So um, personally, that area doesn't scare me off as I think it would other people.
Yeah, I'd rather. It just seems like, as you said, it's a move just to say, well, we did something, and I don't know necessarily. You're gonna basically put him on the first line, but you're gonna have him, Strom, and Tavares on the first line now. I guess that's what I'm assuming. So then you bump Grabowski way back to the third line, and then I guess you're taking, I guess, Bailey out of the lineup, barring no more injuries. So if to me it's like a whatever move. It's a little bit better than Tyler Kennedy. I mean, Parento obviously has more offensive ability than than Kennedy. So if you're going on the mindset of, well, we want to just add a little more firepower at a low cost. Oh, I mean, I see the reason behind it. It doesn't do anything to excite, I think, anyone, or shouldn't really excite anyone. To me, it's a depth move, if that. But I don't. To me, it just reeks of, we're gonna do anything just to say we were in the game, and and it's like almost like I don't want to say it requires no thought, but it seems like it's there. Maybe it's the low hanging fruit, and it's the easy thing to do to say, we made a trade, and we're ready to go to war with this group. I'd rather see Garth Snow get creative, and again, back to my overall original premise, make a bigger move. Again, I think and I'm not saying there's some names out there that I like. Doesn't necessarily mean they're available, and I guess we'll talk about them in a little bit. But I'd rather them make a move for a guy who I really think, even if it's not a rental, even if it's a guy with some term on his contract, like a Scott Hartnell, or like let's say Mike Camilleri out in New Jersey, they seem to be fading now, and you have to wonder if, assuming he could get back healthy soon, is he available? So those are the moves I prefer them go for, as opposed to this. We're going to trade a third-round pick and Scott Mayfield for PA Parento for 20 games, and that's our big deadline acquisition.
I agree. I agree. That's the low hanging fruit move. I mean, I'm totally with you on that. And I agree too that if he could get more creative, then this is a perfect opportunity to do that. Um, that's unfortunately stuff that requires strictly our own speculation, and that's where it becomes a lot more difficult, obviously. But names you bring up, Mike Camilleri would be a perfect fit on this team. He's left wing, which is an area I think of need for the Islanders. Certainly first line left wing, so he slots right in that role. So that immediately that's a name that appeals to me. Although I think he's still hurt. Scott Hartnell, same thing. First line left wing. Scott Hartnell is he's a player that has drummed up a lot of debate with throughout the internet, Islanders internet, over the last couple of days because he's still a really productive player playing on a really bad team who's in the Islanders division with 3 years left on his contract at like $4.75 million, I believe. So if you bring him in, you're basically taking in a player through 2018 or 2019 and hope that he doesn't decline. And a point that I saw that was brought up online, which was, do you really want to be paying Johnny Boychuk and Scott Hartnell over $10 million in 2018? My answer is, I don't know. I think that they could probably do stuff to work around that, right? I mean, it shouldn't. It's only 15% of the cap right now. Theoretically, it should be less than that in 4 years.
And every other team seems to be able to either bury bad contracts, move them, eat some of the salary and trade them away to a team looking to to pick up a cap hit, and maybe you sweeten it with a mid-round draft pick or Midland prospect. So I see teams all the time. I mean, look at Chicago. I mean, how the hell do they continue to have money to make these trades? But yet every time you look, it's, well, 2 guys here, another guy there, another guy there. Pittsburgh does the same thing, seems like every year. Oh, there's no way they're going to have enough money. They go out and they trade get Phil Kessel over, last summer. They got David Perron last year in midseasons. I mean, so the Rangers are another prime example. Oh, they have no cap space. So what they do, they trade for Keith Yandel and they pay a little bit more in terms of players, but they only have to take half his cap hit. So I think there are ways to get creative, to be flexible. Yeah, no, and to that point of, well, do you want to be paying those guys $10.5 million in 2 years from now or 3 years from now? That's assuming that that's kind of assuming worst case scenario for both, that they both kind of fall off a cliff and they're both overpaid, players and in the case of Johnny Boychuk, overpaid, essentially traffic cone out there, and Hartnell just an anchor on the forward group. There's no guarantee. There's nothing that says these guys are going to decline in 3 years. There's nothing that suggests that. It's nothing. Scott Hartnell continues to be productive. So why, this notion that, well, 3 years from now he's going to be terrible. Well, based on what? I mean, you talk about having a little proof. It'd be nice to have a little something other than, well, he's 32 or 33 years old, so he's got to get worse. I mean, that's doesn't really do anything. That's not really that should be kind of a maybe hope or something, but that's not really a fair statement to say.
Yeah, but the aging curve is real. I mean, and it's not just hockey. I mean, hockey, it's worse. I mean, most guys are hitting their primes in their early to mid-20s now, and Scott Hartnell's, we're talking about his mid-30s and the type of game that he plays. I think it's certainly plausible that he's going to decline. I mean, we are seeing it with Johnny Boychuk right now, and I don't think anybody really expected it to happen in the first year of his contract.
I think Boychuk's been a lot better since he came back from injury. Maybe I think early on he definitely was struggling, but I think since he's come back from his injury a few weeks ago, he's been a much better player.
The fact that he's still offensively productive, especially for a defenseman, is going to keep that contract from being a total albatross for a long period of time until that stops. Because there's a lot of things about his game right now that aren't as strong as they were a couple of years, or even as recently as last year, rather. But if he is going to, pot 8 to 10 goals and put up, 30 points, that will eventually offset any deficiencies that he has at this point.
Pete, one thing that I want to ask Pete a question. Pete, I don't know which side of the debate you fall on, but could you think of another player this summer in free agency that will score between 25 and 30 goals a year that you can sign for 3 years under $5 million?
No, because I mean, I know what you're getting at here, and that's Scott Hartnell.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
I mean, but I just had a brilliant idea here.
Okay.
This one stems with my biggest fear based on last season, which is our defense falling apart again, and also our need to add some flair on offense. I feel like Garth could take care of this with one phone call, and it's got to be to Vancouver, and he's got to offer up the first and the prospect, like Scott Mayfield, maybe some filler, and bring back Dan Hamhuis and Radim Verbata. Both of them.
Rabada's a free agent, right, as of the season?
Yup, and he's having his worst year since 2008 this year.
And what's Hamhuis' contract like? I don't know off the top of my head.
They're both free agents after
They're
this
both
year.
free agents.
He's
Yep.
4.5 this year. So Hamhuis has been rumored to not want to leave Western Canada or even the West Coast. So, but let's go under the assumption that he would. That is a deal that I don't know. To me, I don't know if that's worth the first round pick, because ultimately you're getting a guy that plays on the second line and a guy that plays on the second pair, and I don't know if that's enough to move the first rounder. I mean, I see the merit to it, but when we talk about moving first round draft picks, I want to talk about bringing in high end players, or at least players that are playing, on at the very least, their first line or their first pairing, even if it's not on the best team. Vancouver's not a very good team, to be honest, and I don't know. To me, that's almost underwhelming. I don't know if I would hate it, but I don't think I would love it.
I mean, to be fair, Verbata this year is struggling. He only has 12 goals and 24 points, 57 games. But last year, when I believe he played almost a full year with the Sedins, he put up 31 goals and 63 points in 79 games.
So then you basically trade him from it, and you got to put him on the top line with Tavares. So that's what I assume if you trade her first for him, that's what you're going to wind up doing. So because if he's going to recapture any of that magic from last season, you're not going to plug him on the second or third line with Brock Nelson or Franz Nielsen as their centers. You're going to need him to play with Tavares. So basically you're anchoring them together, and then you got to come up with the third guy on that line. I mean, yeah, I kind of agree with Carrie. I'm not going to sit here and I wouldn't throw a fit if that was the kind of the basis for a trade. But I don't know. I don't know if that's really going to kind of elevate us to become a real threatening team. But I agree with your point, Pete. That obviously last season, come the playoffs, we were down 3 defensemen and we were playing Scott Mayfield and Griffin Reinhart 10 to 12 minutes a game, and clearly we struggled as a result of that. Even though we didn't let up a lot of goals, we didn't have that from the back end kind of that ability to break out cleanly and generate any offense. So I understand the premise behind it. I don't know if I love the players involved, especially with Rabada struggling this season. I don't know if, did he fall off a cliff, or does he just need to change of scenery? I really don't know.
That's the same concern as Hartnell, right? I mean, Verbata's 34, and it could be a blip. We just don't know. But pretty much every aspect of his game has fallen off a cliff this year.
Yeah, but the difference is
what about
Verbata's a free agent.
What about Hartnell's falling off a cliff, though? I mean, that's what I don't. I mean,
well, nothing. But my point is that Verbata scored 31 goals as a 33-year-old, and now he's fallen off at 34, and that is the Scott Hartnell risk right there.
But that's gonna be a risk with any player you trade for that has term on. I mean, you can't just if there was some proof that Hartnell was starting to decline right now, I'd say okay. Makes a lot of sense. Maybe you don't want to trade a ton for him or really go all in for him, but you're kind of basing it on an assumption that he's going to get that way, and he hasn't done it yet. He's still what's he on pace to score 27, 28 goals?
No, totally. But what was the proof that Verbata was going to fall off a cliff this year? Nothing, and that's the concern. I'm not saying it would definitely happen.
What was the proof that Jim Carrey would have been good for 2 years and then as a 22-year-old goalie and then been terrible since and fall off the face of the earth? You don't know with these players. I mean, it doesn't necessarily. I mean, I understand your point, but you can make that argument about every player. Well, what about next year? What if they suck next year? Well, it could happen, but you can only base it on the evidence you have. Nothing that Hartnell's done or hasn't done up until this point has given any indication that next year or the year after he's going to fall apart. He very well may, because as you said, he is 33 years old. but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to. I mean, look at Jerome McGinley. Was he 37, 38, 39? I don't know the exact age. He scores, 25 to 30 goals in his sleep every season. Yeah,
Yep.
he's maybe not the same dynamic player he was as a 28-year-old, which I think is fair to say for anyone, but he's still as productive. He's still a very productive winger, so.
Yeah, he is. No, he is. And Aginla is actually a perfect example of the opposite of what I'm saying, which is, yeah, there are players that are still productive into their late 30s that play that, that type of game. Yeah, I mean, just getting back to Rabada, getting back to one of Pete's points earlier, he has 18 points in 42 playoff games. So is this another example of a player that are we concerned about their playoff production, or are we just kind of okay with it and hope for the best?
I mean, that's almost half a point a game, which when you consider the scoring in the playoffs is lower isn't terrible. But I mean, he's also out of that mold that you question. And I know it's stereotypical, but he's a European and he doesn't play a physical style of hockey. And you always question those types when it comes to the playoffs. But I mean, yeah, it's a valid concern. But I mean, he's certainly scoring at a higher rate than Parento is.
Well, historically, yes, but not this year. And again, that could be that's a function of 1 year. The thing that comparing Parenta to Verbata is that he does have proven chemistry here. So if you're going on the merit that he's a cheaper value in terms of cost, and he does have previous success here, to me, I would prefer Parenta over Verbata. But a guy that you're really interested in that I would prefer over both of them is Yuri Hoodler. And I kind of want to hear your thoughts on that, because I guess the rumor is that his asking price is a second-round draft pick. Obviously that's not going to happen from us since we don't have one, but we do have a third-round pick and we do have a plethora of B-level prospects. And I'm wondering if I don't know what the market on him is going to be, but if it's not as strong as some other players, maybe there is a chance that the Islanders could kind of slip in there and get him for a third-round pick and a prospect. Mike, I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on him, because to me he's kind of like in the middle of the top guys and right below them and right above like the PA Parentos of the world.
Yeah, well, I think again, if the rumors are true that the cost is only a second-round pick, I don't love him. I know he was very good last season playing with Goudreau and Monahan. They obviously, and I think they even highlighted on the broadcast last night, they haven't had that same chemistry or production this season. And Hudler, he had a solid career in Detroit. He's not a bad player. Is he gonna be a completely impactful player and he's gonna take the team from being a good team to this great team? Probably not. He reminds me a little bit of Parento in that regard, where I think he's not the knock your socks off transaction that's gonna get the fan base and get the players all jazzed up. But if it's gonna only cost a third-round pick and a mid-level prospect like a Sebastian Kohlberg type, then maybe it's worth a shot. But from Calgary's standpoint, if the asking price is only a second-round pick, I can definitely see him. Our number of teams being interested, obviously, and either driving up the price or seeing him end up elsewhere. But the theory of Hudler, it's not a bad idea. I know Pete. Yeah, Pete was very has been kind of pushing that the last few weeks. I guess Pete, just to tie it into a little bit of the Islanders, did anything you see last night kind of either shy you away from that thought, or do you still on the Hudler train at this point?
Well, the Calgary Flames are a really bad team, to be honest. They're a one-line team, which is Goudreau, Monahan, and Hudler. And you look at Yuri Hudler, and he's played in 77 career playoff games, over 40 career playoff points. He's won a Stanley Cup. He's had 2 playoff runs of over 20 games. Last year in the playoffs, he put up 8 points in 11 games with the Flames. I mean, in the last 4 years, he's played 248 games with the Flames, and he's put up 192 points. So this guy produces offense. This guy's been in the playoffs before. He's won in the playoffs before. And if he's coming at that price of a second rounder, I don't see why you can't do that. He's only 32 years old, so he is a free agent at the end of the year. But if you acquire him and he likes it here, he has some success here. Maybe you put him with Tavares and he has some success. You could
Yeah,
sign Yuri. You could sign Yuri
yeah.
Hoodler to a contract and be Kyle Oposo's replacement.
You know what's interesting though? I mean, and I agree with a lot of what you said. I mean, and I'm glad you brought up his, you mentioned his playoff production, and that's obviously a big component of what one of the items we're looking for. But you know, and I read the same reports that Carrie did as well. That it seems to be the second round pick is kind of the what they're looking for. But for all the reasons you just said, Pete, I'm really surprised that is only his asking price. It almost seems like is there something we're missing with him? Is there a
I
reason? Is there a reason why only a second? Because you would think, especially with the weekend to go before the deadline, if you're the general manager, if you're Brian Burke, you say, no, we want a first round pick, we want a prospect, and then obviously you come down on that price as it gets closer when no one meets it. But it kind of just raises an eyebrow that only a second round pick and you're that open about it that soon. It just seems like an odd thing to come out with.
I don't think Calgary has a very good management staff. I don't think Brad Treliving is very good, and I think Brian Burke is well past his prime at this point. What I'm guessing they think Hoodler is just kind of riding the wave of Johnny Gaudreau and Sean Monahan. Maybe that's true. I don't know. But over the last few years, especially with Calgary, he's been one of their best players. And he obviously has experience playing with really good players, dating back to the beginning of his career with Detroit. To me, this almost seems like a situation where they're actually undervaluing him because if it were me, I would be asking for a first round pick for a guy.
Exactly, and that's what I was kind of, I think maybe Pete even was trying to say something similar. It almost seems like it's too good to be true, and I'm almost thinking like, oh, is there something we're missing about the guy? I mean, I don't profess to watch Calgary, on a nightly basis. So, is he bad defensively? Is he a guy in the locker room that nobody likes, and they just can't wait to get rid of him? But as it says, it seems like they're almost undervaluing him, and with still 3 days to go before the trade deadline, I would think most GMs, even the ones who are not very good, you would be looking. You try to pump your guys' value up as much as possible, and they almost seem like they're trying to suppress it for some reason.
I mean, I know I have Yuri Hoodler on my fantasy team, and last season he put up 31 goals and 76 points in 78 games. And Harris immediately told me he's not a fan of Hoodler. He's not going to repeat that, which he isn't, to be fair. He's put up 35 in 53 games. And I know the Calgary Flames are not a advanced stats darling team, and I could see that Hoodler shot 19.6% shooting percentage last year. So I assume there's some of that involved, how sustainable his play is, and whether he's a good possession player. I'm not sure. Maybe Carey could add something to that. But I mean, Harris told me straight up last year that he doesn't like Hoodler. He's not going to repeat. He's not a fan. I don't know. I mean, with the way the league's thinking these days with the stats, maybe that lowers his value a little. Carey
No,
probably knows a
it
lot more.
doesn't. Again, this all goes back to if Calgary or other teams think that he's basically just riding the wave on that first line because for the last 3 years he's been above average possession relative to Calgary, who, as we all know, have been dreadful in that regard. So, I could see the argument against him before last year, but the last 2 years I think he's proven that he can definitely play on good lines in this league, and he can be very productive in those roles in basically every aspect. The only thing that I could think of is Calgary really builds their team on a specific player type, and Yuri Hoodler, who is 5'10" and 183 pounds, as we saw last night, is not that player type. So maybe it's just them thinking that he's not like a stylistic fit for them. Doesn't make any sense to me, but it's the best thing that I could come up with because, again, to your guys' points, it seems like he would be a really good value pickup.
Yeah,
And
it's just odd that a team would come out so soon, or at least the rumors are that the cost is only a second round pick. You look at the production, as you guys said, and say, wow, he's been productive, and yeah, maybe it is just a matter of, as you said, is he just a product of his teammates or his line mates, and teams could see through that. But I don't know. It just when I see something like that, like a too good to be true or too low a price, it just raises an eyebrow for me, or raises a flag for me, because am I missing something with him? Is he really this good a player? There must be something more to this if that's all his cost is.
I mean, it's definitely a fair question, but at the price of a second rounder, which we don't have to be fair, but even a third, I would consider moving the first for Hoodler. I would if push came to shove. But even if it doesn't come to that, a third and a prospect like Scott Mayfield or a second rounder next year, I would obviously take that risk and find out what's wrong with Hoodler. I mean, I would definitely take that risk.
Me too. And if there's one team that probably loves Scott Mayfield, it's the Calgary Flames. So maybe you can, get them to take him.
Yeah, it's funny. One other thing I know Carey before broke the trade, or not didn't break the trade, but brought it to our attention. The other interesting thing with the trade stuff tonight is Edmonton, I know, scratched Teddy Purcell and Justin Schultz. There's obviously rumors that those guys will be on the move before Monday. Any interest in those guys? Schultz, I know he's struggled, especially this season. A lot of people think maybe just he needs to change the scenery. I believe he's a restricted free agent after this season. Came into the league with a lot of high expectations, and he just hasn't. Whether it's because he's on a terrible Edmonton team or whatever, he just hasn't obviously lived up to that. And then a guy like Purcell, who has some playoff experience, he's obviously just more of a depth guy. He'd probably be like a Tyler Kennedy type of pickup, maybe a little bit better offensively. But any interest in either of those names?
Not really. Purcell's pretty good, honestly, and I could see why teams are interested in him. His point production is pretty solid, especially over the last couple of years. He's kind of put 12 goals a year, 25, 30 assists. It's pretty decent. He's a good possession player, and he's a pretty big guy. He's 6'2", so I could see why teams are interested in him. I just don't, to your point, to me he's like a tier even below the PA Parentos of the world. So, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't hate it if they brought it in, but I really feel, and this is where the Islanders being somewhat of a budget team still comes into play, because Teddy Purcell's making $4.5 million, and if Justin Schultz is part of that package, he's making $3.9 million. And so if they bring in both of those players, or even one of those players, they're probably done, even with the cap considerations in that they'd have more space. So if we had one shot, those aren't the guys that I'm bringing in. I don't even think I'd bring them in last ditch.
At this point in the year, they're not paying even close to that amount of money, though. They're probably paying them like $3 million combined.
Yeah, but if they're paying them $3 million combined, do we really think that Garth Snow's budget is that much over $3 million at this point?
I would be extremely alarmed and concerned if Ledecky and Malkin wouldn't pay $3 million for an extended playoff run at this point.
But it's not them still.
They're right there. I mean, they're 4 months from overtaking the whole thing. I'm sure they'd pay for it if push came to shove. And Long was like, "No, I'm not doing it." Ledecky and Malkin would be like, "All right, I'll do it." I mean,
sure, that's a possibility. I just don't know if we could bank on that at this point.
But
I will say, it's not a large sample size for Teddy Purcell. He's only been in the playoffs twice, both with Tampa Bay. His first time back in 10-11, he had 17 points in 18 games. Obviously, that's fantastic. And then in 2013-14 season, he had 1 point in 4 games. So, not a big sample size, obviously, but he has some playoff experience, some playoff success.
yeah, but that Tampa team also, I'm pretty sure they lost Ben Bishop, and they got swept by the Canadiens, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, they did.
So
they were really bad.
that series doesn't count.
Here's a name that we brought up, and everyone has him ranked really, really high. And for the life of me, I can't understand why. And it's Mikhail Botker. Every time I look at this guy's stats, even his regular stats, there's nothing about him that interests me, at all. His 5-on-5 scoring, he's putting up less than basically every single top UFA rental out there. And I mean, I know he plays on a bad team, but to me, he just seems really unimpressive. And they are asking, I think, a first round pick for him. It's just not a price that I would even go near paying for him. I don't know what you guys think, but to me, this is a player that I have literally no interest in.
No, he's a young player, and I mean, I can't say I watch a lot of Arizona Coyotes hockey, but he's always been a player that has had potential, and you're waiting for him to put it together. I mean, at this point in the year and heading into the playoffs, I don't think you're looking to acquire a project. You're especially at that price. So, I mean, you gotta look at the Franz Nielsen Denmark connection and think maybe something there. But I mean, for a first rounder, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't touch it. And I mean, I his numbers are not impressive. And at this point, the Islanders aren't in a position where they could acquire someone, throw him in the lineup, and hope he starts playing well. I'm sorry. And yeah, I mean, at this point, that's not what the Islanders should be about.
Yeah, he's right. He's a younger guy. He's still, relatively young player. The whole Denmark connection. The only reason why somehow I can see Garth being interested in this is he, if Garth is trying to build a speed team with, with some offensive skill, he obviously fits the mold in that regard. Garth seems to have an affinity for first round, ex first round picks. I think Botka was a first round pick, obviously back what '07 or '08. I forgot the exact year. So yeah, I mean, while it's not my first choice by any stretch, I would obviously prefer if they're going to trade a first round to maybe somebody different, a little bit bigger, can play a little more quote unquote playoff style hockey. I could see there being some interest here from Garth on Garth's side. He has right now what 38 points. Figure he'll finish somewhere around 50 or so. Again, nothing, not terrible, but again, is it game breaking? I don't know. And yet, to Pete's point, do I want to acquire a guy and have to stick him on the top line with Tavares to see if he kind of puts it together and becomes this, the first round talent they all thought he would be when he was drafted. Um, he's a sexy name. He's speedy. He has some skill. I can see why people fall in love with him, but I don't know. I don't think he's definitely not one of my top couple choices if they were going to acquire someone by Monday.
No, and of his 38 points, 18 of them have come on the power play. That
Well, I wouldn't sneeze at that. I mean, listen, look at our power play in the playoffs last season. That I don't think that's. While I understand your point, to have a guy. Now, I don't think it's worth a first round pick, but to have a guy who has power play prowess is not something that's awful either.
No, but his even strength play is really bad, and I think that is an area where I really think that if you take the power play and take the even strength game, I think the even strength game for the Islanders needs more work. The power play is streaky, and yeah, last year during the playoffs it was beyond awful. But if I'm looking to acquire a player, I'm not really looking to acquire a specialist at this point. I'm looking more towards acquiring a player that is going to make the team better in their even strength play, and I don't think that Mikhail Boedker does that at all. In fact, I see him as really just not a good even strength player at this point in his career. His possession numbers are bad. His point totals are bad. He's shooting 9%, which is slightly below his career average. I'm just not seeing the um, I'm just not seeing the real appeal here. I could see why a team that I could see going for it would be a team that is further along in their development than the Islanders, and maybe is trying to or doesn't look at advanced stats as much as teams like we think the Islanders do. But I just don't think he's the right fit here. The Denmark connection notwithstanding.
No, a name that I'd consider way before I'd consider Bodker would be Versteeg from the Hurricanes. I mean, he's put up over 30 points this year. If you're looking at bringing a depth option, which someone like Parento would be or Bodker would be, names like that. I mean, Versteeg's played in 84 career playoff games. He produces at exactly half a point a game. He has 16 playoff goals. He's won 2 cups. I mean, if you're going to bring in a guy that you're going to just throw into that mishmash with the middle six with names like Lee and Bailey and Kuhlman and Grabowski, Why not throw a guy that's proven he can produce in the playoffs, has 2 cups? I would rather acquire someone like him. I'm sure he'd be cheaper than Bodker as well. I mean, a name like that would be something like I couldn't see hurting. I mean, I'm sure he wouldn't cost much more than a third round pick at this point.
I love it. I'm a big fan of Chris Versteeg. I think he does a lot of things really well, and he's a player that, to your point, is probably really undervalued. I think this is something that goes around all leagues, frankly. But when players start to like play for 5 or 6 different teams, two things happen. Teams are either like very scared of them, or teams will do all they can to get a player like this. And with in the case of Versteeg, I think due to the reputation that he had as a younger player, teams are starting to get more scared of him. And so I think that's why he's weighed down on everyone's list. But I think he's actually a perfect fit for the Islanders right now. I'd be very much in favor of bringing him in.
I guess if you make a trade, a depth trade for a guy like Prestige or Parento or anyone else, realistically, who are you? If everyone's fully healthy, who in the top 12 forward wise do you sit? I think it's a legitimate question. Who's kind of your candidates to be the guy, the odd man out in those cases?
Whoever's not playing well, because if you remember last year, I mean, if we had this podcast at this exact same time last year, no one would be saying we're sitting Anders Lee in the playoffs, and he sat both elimination games. Brock Nelson sat a game. I mean, it's all up to the moment. I mean, if we go into the playoffs and Mikhail Grabowski hasn't scored a goal since before his injury, that like right now, I mean, yeah, I'd sit Grabowski for Versteeg. I mean, it's just it comes down to who's playing well, and who's not. I mean, who would have thought that our second best goal scorer in the regular season last year would not be dressed for our 2 elimination games?
Yeah, and I don't think that Anders Lee or Brock Nelson are getting anywhere near the same leeway they got last year. Jack's pretty tough, way more tough than he gets credit for. And a lot of players, even this year, have been scratched. He scratched Kyle Oposo a couple of years ago during the regular season. He's way less afraid of scratching players than I think people give him credit for. So I agree with Pete. It's really a situation of whoever's not playing well, and outside of maybe 3 or 4 players, that to me could be anyone on the roster at any given time. So it just opens up a whole lot of flexibility, in my opinion.
I mean, I brought up Hamus and I addressed my concern for a defenseman, but outside of Hamus, I'm looking at the list of potential rentals. I'm telling you, man, there's nothing here. And I mean, I would love to acquire someone, but I'm looking at the list right now, and I see Chris Russell, who
No.
from I heard he sucks. I mean, I've never seen
No.
him.
Chris Russell is Andrew McDonald
Yeah, I
before.
mean,
Yeah.
Nicholas Grossman on the Coyotes, who also probably sucks.
Nope.
Yeah.
Pass.
Grant Klitzum, Yannick Weber, the corpse of Chris Phillips, and then the two probably most palatable names are David Schlemko and Patrick Wierkach from the Senators. But I mean, none of those names are needle movers, and none of those. If we had to call on any of those, save for maybe Schlemko and maybe Phillips because of his experience, but if any of those names were in our lineup in the playoffs, I wouldn't be happy. And I mean, if you think about it now, right now, our sixth defenseman is one of Zhidlicki or Straight, or if Ryan Pulak impresses, he's in there. But I mean, we're one injury away from having Straight in there, Zhidlicki in there, and after last year, we saw 3 injuries. So I mean, the D does scare me, and I don't see any real solutions out there.
Yeah, well, I mean, defense. It's funny, defensemen. There's always going to be, and the prices for defensemen are always ridiculous because teams you can never have too many good quality defensemen, and even not good defensemen like Roman Polak go for what two? What do you go for 2 second round picks? I think the other day, or 2 third round picks. Forgot exactly, but he went I think more than what he went for a price more than what people anticipated.
It was him and Spalling for 2 second rounders.
Right. So yeah, it's unless you're willing to really overpay for a defenseman, you're kind of stuck with this bottom, scraping the bottom of the barrel, hoping your guys stay healthy, maybe catch a little lightning in a bottle. At this point, if the option is trading, for you trading something, 2 third round picks for a number 6 defenseman, you're better off just picking up Jared Cowan off waivers. Toronto put him on waivers today. I know he has one more year on his contract, and
No.
I don't profess he's any good, but at that point, would you if you're hell bent on, well, let's we need another defenseman in here. I almost rather them just pay money as opposed to trading away a couple guys for, a number six defenseman.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted them to claim Christian Ehrhoff when he was available, but that obviously didn't happen. The guy that I, I'm going to start it with this. I think they definitely need to bring in a defenseman because if you take a look at where things are right now, it's really, really ugly if anyone gets hurt. So to me, it's not a needle mover in the general sense of making the team better at the high end. To me, it's a needle mover of getting guys out of the lineup that shouldn't be in the lineup. And while Pete is correct that the available defensemen that we know of are honestly downright putrid, the one guy that really sticks out to me is David Schlemko. Plays all three situations for New Jersey. He's making absolute peanuts. He's a really good puck mover, really mobile. Can play an offensive game. I think he fits the type of system that the Islanders are trying to play. He obviously, given his career, I think would be fine being a scratch for a large amount of games. So to me, that is the number one target. And to Pete's point, Patrick Rearcodge would be number two on my list, but they have a little bit more flexibility with that because he's a restricted free agent, but his qualifying offer is like $3 million, and I don't think I'd really be willing to pay that at this point. So even though he's a restricted free agent, which likely drives up the cost, to me, I would be treating it as a pure rental. So from a value perspective, there may not be a match there. Outside of that, it is really, really ugly. And I'm sure that both of those guys are frankly going to have a lot of teams looking in after them. So it'll be really interesting to see if anything is done there. But I certainly think they need it.
I mean, if this situation is so bleak, how did Christian Air have clear waivers and then get traded for Rob Scuderi, who hasn't been good since 2009?
I have no idea. I can't explain that at all. I don't get it. Scuderi is awful. I can't explain that deal. I have no idea. I can't defend it from Los Angeles' standpoint.
Yeah, I don't understand how Ehrhoff clears waivers and then he gets traded to the Blackhawks, a week later or 2 weeks later. It just, I don't know. I'm not going to start bashing Garth Snow, but it just doesn't. It really makes you scratch your head, and because clearly he wasn't the only GM to kind of let Ehrhoff pass through him. It just, with like I said, with such a dearth of even like NHL regular defensemen that are available in trade, I don't understand how a guy like him could pass through waivers who had, on a 1 year deal making, little money. It really makes you question, what did GM see or not see in him that they couldn't at least take a flyer on him for the last half of the season?
Yeah, it makes me think that something went on behind the scenes in Los Angeles that scared a lot of GMs away because. And then there's the other aspect of when players hit waivers. I feel like when prominent players hit waivers, it feels like GMs like treat them like they're complete outcasts. Like the only times that players are getting claimed these days, I feel like if they haven't gotten a shot yet, and a team's like really trying to give them their first opportunity, or they so desperately need a body that they'll basically just take anyone. I don't know. To me, Christian Ehrhoff is still a pretty good player. I don't know why he passed. I frankly can't explain it all that well.
I mean, right now in the Islanders world, we all know that Travis Hamonic requested a trade, Kyle Oposto's a free agent, and Franz Nielsen's a free agent. So everyone's asking me on Twitter, are we trading Hammer? Are we trading Oposto? What are we doing with Franz? And I mean, I can't even explain. I would. I don't know. I don't understand why people think we have to trade any of these three right now. This team, for the first time since I think 03, 04, 02, 03, 03, 04, is going to make the playoffs for back-to-back years. I mean, it doesn't happen anymore. The Islanders haven't done this I'm sorry for cursing, 13 years. I mean, why would you trade any of these three right now? Because Kyle Oposo, he's probably going to walk. The Islanders don't look like they want to pay him what he should make. So, I mean, I see people proposing trading for Hartnell and then flipping Oposo for a package. No, keep Oposo. Trade for Hartnell. Keep both. Make a run for it. Try and get better. Try and advance in the playoffs. You don't have to get something for Kyle Oposo. It's perfectly okay for Kyle Oposo to walk at the end of the season for the Islanders to get absolutely nothing for him. Travis Hamonic requested a trade in preseason. His agent went to TSN this week and said they are perfectly fine with him getting traded in the offseason. Why would the Islanders trade Travis Hamonic right now, especially for the proposals you see? Jordan Eberle, who's playing defense for us if we trade Travis Hamonic for Jordan Eberle right now? Who is playing defense for us in the playoffs? Who's shutting down Alex Ovechkin, or who's shutting down Rick Nash? Well, you don't really need to shut down Rick Nash in the playoffs. He does that himself. But anyway, you see my point right now. Franz Nielsen, who's checking the other team's best line? You are not trading any of these three right now. This team is not in a position to take players off its roster. It's in a position to add players to its roster. And other than trading for someone like Steven Stamkos, I am not trading any of these three players off this roster before Monday. That was me preaching. I don't know if you guys have anything
No, Pete, I think I agree. Could not have said it better myself. I think it's foolish to think that they're going to trade away three guys of this importance on the team when they're clearly, it looks like they're headed for another playoff berth. Looks like they're heading for a potential matchup with the Rangers. You're not going to trade away arguably your best overall defenseman, your best two-way forward, and arguably your second or third best forward, or winger on the team. So yeah, it makes zero sense at this point to even consider a trade of any of those three guys. Like you said, like Carrie said before, when Tavares was interviewed by Arthur Staple, last day or two, they expect to add players. They don't expect to, as you said, Pete, we're going to trade for Hartnell and then we're going to ship a Poso off for a number one draft pick and recoup that. No, we're going to do, if anything, we're going to have both those guys because that makes us a better team for now. And if a Poso walks at the end of the season, we get nothing and we get no draft picks or prospects, so be it. It's nothing. Life will go on. We will be okay. The return is a playoff run, and hopefully it's a long run. So I'm with you, Pete, 100%.
They're going to replace him. They're not just going to put no one in that spot. I mean, yeah, we can get into. I'm sure we're going to talk a whole lot about Kyle Oposo over the next couple of months, but this is what I'm going to kind of end this with. People are so worried about John Tavares leaving, John Tavares becoming a free agent and bolting. John Tavares isn't happy here. You know how John Tavares doesn't get happy here? When the team is like top 7 in the league and you start taking away their best players. That's how you piss off John Tavares. That simple. Don't do it.
I agree 100%.
Especially if he's been here since 2009 and he's seen the playoffs twice, and this is going to be his third time. And it's going to be the first time that he's seen them back-to-back years. And you're going to take away the winger he's spent most of his Islanders career with, or his alternate captain and second-line center, or his number one defenseman that he's grown up with? Hell no. Hellno. No.
Garth is not a stupid guy. He's not going to risk losing the room over futures. They have worked way too long, and I stress way too long, to get to this point to basically piss it away and piss all their players off in the process over trading Kyle Oposo for a first-round draft pick. I mean, you've got to be kidding me. It's not happening.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think you guys said it perfectly. It's such a ridiculous notion to think that they will trade or they should trade any of those three guys. And like I said, they'll reload in the off season and see what happens. Hopefully some of those guys will be back. Most likely, at least one or two won't be, but. You make those decisions in the off season. For now, you focus on improving the club on the ice and hoping that you can get an extended run out of this group.
And who are our two best players in the Penguins series? To me, it's not even a question. It was Travis Hamonic and Kyle Oposo. And who was our best forward in last year's series? I would go with Kyle Oposo. I mean, both these guys have proven they step up when games get tough. Kyle Oposo scored some huge goals in that Penguins series, fought Matt Niskanen. He scored some goals last year. He scored that goal to open the scoring Game 3 at the Coliseum. Kyle Oposo is a playoff performer. He's proven it over his 2 appearances. Travis Hamonic's style is built perfectly for the playoffs. These are the type of players we're looking to acquire.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, yeah, and I've been a big proponent of becoming a heavier team up front in the playoffs. So it wouldn't make sense for me to advocate to trade a Poso, and then the next breath say, well, we need to get a guy like Hartnell or Ladd or some type of bigger body who could play. Because that's, as you said, Pete, in the playoffs, a Poso, now it's been 2 years or 2 playoff trips, and he's done well both times. Um, who knows if he'll do it again? But based on his first two trips, he's been a huge positive. As you said, he's arguably been our best forward over those 13 games. So absolutely, he's a guy I feel comfortable with. When the playoffs start, he will play well. He may not always give you that effort in the regular season. He may take some bad penalties. He may be a little bit lazy in his own end. But come playoff time, he's proven so far that he has stepped up his game and is a player you can count on in those moments.
All right. We'll wrap it up here by going around the room and making our final predictions as to what moves Arsenal will make before the trade deadline on Monday. You got to nail who he acquires, what he trades. If you think there's more than one move, list both. Carrie, we'll start with you.
Okay. He's going to. We are going to see the return of P.A. Parento. It's going to happen. And I think that's going to be it. I think one trade for Parento, second round pick in 2017. That's my guess.
One move, that's it.
That's it.
Mike, what do you see happening?
I think we'll add I don't really have a specific name, but I think we'll add a depth defenseman for a third round pick this year. It's gonna be a guy who's gonna be a 6 or 7 guy, not gonna play every night, but I think that's be one move. And up front, man, you put me on the spot here. And it's funny, I was thinking about it this whole conversation. I was thinking about when Pete asked the question, who do I think they're gonna go for? Who do I want to say? I don't like him, and we spoke about him actually, but for some of the reasons I hinted at, I have a funny feeling they're going to make a run at Botka. That former first-round pick, that pedigree, the Danish connection. I'm not saying I agree with it or love it, but I have a funny feeling we're going to stay. Come Monday, Botka's going to end up with either us or the Penguins. That's my prediction.
Wow, I mean, I can't even answer this question myself. For some reason, I feel like Monday afternoon will be disappointing. I agree with Carrie. It's going to be Parento a for a second rounder in 2017 and a prospect like Kohlberg. And I think he'll add someone like Yannick Weber from Vancouver for like a fourth rounder. But that's my guess.
The only name that we didn't talk about that would be total Islanders at the trade deadline is Lee Stepniak. So let's leave that door open too.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I wouldn't like that at all. That's not.
No, but it would be that is your Tyler Kennedy move right there.
I mean, he's had a good year with the Devils, to be fair, but yeah, he's not a needle mover.
Maybe we'll trade for Matt Molson again.
Yeah, him and his 6 goals or whatever the hell he has now.
Conceivably, the Leafs could trade Brad Boyes, Michael Grabner, and P.A. Parento to the Islanders.
Yeah. One final name that I did read something about, and I don't think the Islanders have any interest in him. It would be Brian Bickle, who supposedly the Blackhawks will be willing to package a draft pick with Bickle just to take the salary off their books. And Bickle's been successful in the playoffs. I mean, I'm sure there's a team out there that would be willing to go for that. I don't think it's the Islanders, but it's something to consider.
It's going to be a team like a team that could do that would be like Arizona or I'll rebuild maybe Edmonton. A rebuilding team's going to do that. I don't think you're going to see a playoff team do that. I think they're going to try to hoard their cap space and go for a bigger fish in that regard.
But if there's one, San Jose Sharks. That's my prediction there.
All right. So we'll be back on Monday night to wrap up what I think will not be an eventful trade deadline, but hopefully for our sake it is. So thanks for listening. Make sure to rate us and review us on iTunes podcasts. And make sure to follow along on Twitter, as I'll be keeping you all up to date with trades, especially by the Islanders, but all around the league, I'll probably be on my laptop all day, probably skipping class, all that good stuff. But yeah, any final thoughts, boys?
Uh, no, I think I think Bodker is going to be the hot name that for some reason I just got a funny feeling we're going to be tied to come Monday. I think we will continue our good road play with another victory on Sunday in Edmonton.
Yeah, I agree. We'll win in Edmonton, and then I guess we'll see what happens on Monday.
All right, thanks for listening. Let's go Islanders. Let's go Garth.